This lesson is going to serve as a bit of a review because we've covered this in previous lessons. But by the end of this lesson, you're going to have a deeper understanding of inputs and outputs in Python scripts within Dynamo. With that in mind, we're going to jump right into Dynamo and Revit for the rest of this lesson. Alright, for this lesson, we're going to move a little bit faster because, like I said, this one's a bit of a recap, but we're in Dynamo within Revit 23. We're going to right-click and search for a Python script. In this case, we do have the default template at this point, and we get a default of input 0. Once again, to add inputs to a Python script, we can add the plus sign to add more or minus to subtract. So that's kind of how that general interaction works. We'll go ahead and leave this on 3 inputs, 0, 1, and 2 for now. What we'll go ahead and do is we'll double click within the Python script. Once again, we're going to delete line 7 through 10 in this case, just to clean it up a bit. And we can define a few variables. In this case, we're going to do first equals n0. I'm going to copy this back half just to make it quicker. Second equals n1 in this case. And third equals n2. So in this case, we have our 3 inputs defined. If I hit run, our Python script's still waiting for some input, so it doesn't know what's going on quite yet. So let's go ahead and give it a few inputs. We'll double click for a code block to make things simple. And in this case, we'll do a mixed set of data. So we'll do A with parentheses, 1, and we'll also do, or let's go ahead and do a full word. We'll do apple. So in this case, we'll plug this in to each of the corresponding ports. So in this case, those are all fulfilled. If we hit run, our Python script looks like it's not doing anything, and that's because by default, we're just returning the number 0. That's what comes with your Python script when you place it in the canvas. In this case, if we type in first as an output on line 13, we get the letter A. Third will give us the word apple, and second will give us the number 1. So those are how our inputs and outputs work within our Python script. If we wanted to return these all together, we can actually do this by adding commas between the values. When we hit run, we will get a list of elements as our output. So by default, Python scripts output everything as one list. This can be a list that has several items or a list of lists. In this case, if we add a bracket around first and then a bracket around second and third together and hit run, we'll see that we have sublist being output as well. So that's something to keep in mind if you're working with elements like rooms. You might want a sublist for each room depending on what you're obtaining. In my case, when I work in Dynamo a lot, I'm working with rooms and the elements within them. So I would have the room as the top item, that outer list, and then I'd have the sublists as items within the room or something like that. You can actually nest these even further if we keep adding brackets around them as well. So in the case of working with Python scripts on down the line in Dynamo, if I zoom out, I'm going to hit run just to make sure. And let's say we wanted to get at this list that has the 1 and the apple in it as the values. You would actually have to get the item at that index. In this case, there is a node for it, get item at index, that we can use, or in a code block, we can say a variable name equals, we're just going to do list 1. So what we're telling it is get the items at that list 1 and return those values. So if you do have several interactions happening in a Python script and you're splitting those out into multiple lists, you don't have any way of naming them technically. There are a few ways regarding using other data types like dictionaries, which we'll get into in a later lesson, but you would have to start to get at that data in this way. A lot of times with Python scripts, people will flatten down the data and then reconstruct it after, which is fine as well. But it's very, very important to understand kind of how these inputs and outputs work in this regard. So with that in mind, that is a deeper explanation into inputs and outputs. Like I said, we've covered those a few times in the previous lessons so far, but this one's dedicated to these inputs and outputs just to reinforce that knowledge for you. In the next lessons, we're going to look at data types, and inputs and outputs are definitely going to play a role within those lessons. So I'll see you in the next lesson.